Chapter 6 The Last Bastion and Water. Reeds lower their heads, the wind is howling eerily, the flame sings in the ruins. Burning are our houses, burning are our hearts, full of tears and anger. Dark comes up the valley, fire runs up the stubble, shroud covers the sky. The crane shouts in the distance our last song. Today is the day to die. Fragment of Kireni's funeral song. I don't know how long I was asleep. I don't even know if I slept or if I died for a while. I remembered the blurry sight of rocks, stones and shrubs moving in front of my dead eyes, even though I was lying completely still on something hard and couldn't move. I also remembered vague images of strange riders traveling beside the cart, looking like moss-covered scarecrows made of rotting tree trunks, overgrown with grass and branches. I accepted the sight calmly, as one does in a dream. Then I noticed they were wearing brown and dull-colored clothing, and their heads and faces were wrapped in scarves. Both the horse and the rider were covered in a netting caparison woven with branches and blades of grass. They resembled moving bushes. I didn't know whether I was hallucinating or really seeing this. These were just flashes, dreams and hazy impressions that I was seeing something. Our captors resembled fairy tale creatures, monsters covered in grass from the forests of Jamarkand, Leshi, which in the Amitraji were called Alhavris, forest demons, but my fevered mind saw nothing strange in them. I truly woke up only once we made camp. Hone and I were lying side by side, face down in a small hollow surrounded by rocks. It was daytime, and our captors were asleep. They lay curled up among rocks and tufts of dry grass, and at first I didn't notice them at all. Then I tried to move, and it felt like my head had split into quarters. I'd never felt anything like it. My throat was crackled like the bottom of a dried-up river, and even blinking my eyelids hurt. Worse still, my entire body was numb and lifeless. I could not move. After a long time, I managed to bend my fingers, and after what felt like eternity of effort, I forced my arm to shift slightly. It felt like it wasn't mine, like a wooden prosthesis has been attached to me. I stretched it out in front of me, then tried to move the rest of my body. I used all my strength and managed to crawl forward. A hand's length. Someone knelt with their full weight, pressing one knee between my shoulder blades. In front of my eyes, I saw a hand made of grey, dried clay, from which a wide blade of a short, double-edged knife emerged. Then I heard a soft sound, like someone snapping their fingers. The knee pressing me into the stones disappeared. With effort, I turned my head and saw that one of the previously sleeping creatures was now sitting with its legs tucked beneath it. In the face that looked like a mask made of dried mud, only the eyes shone. The creature raised its hand to its face and made a series of quick, intricate gestures. The one who had been sitting on my back responded with similar finger movements, and the knife suddenly disappeared from the other hand. They sat me down, handed me a wooden cup full of water without a word, and motioned with a nod for me to drink. I drank. If I had been able to reach the worst swamp puddle or duck pond, I would have drunk from it too. The water ran the dried valley of my throat painfully, as if it were carving out a new channel. I was given a second cup, and when I emptied that as well, I felt my tongue go numb, and that was the last thing that crossed my mind before I toppled over like a sack, straight into the darkness. I didn't know how long I had been traveling like a bundle tossed onto a cart, escorted by strange, silent phantoms. At first they seemed to travel only by night. Then continuously, day and night. Never did any of them utter a single word. One night, I briefly woke up while it was raining and managed to rinse my throat with real water. Just before I slipped back into a feverish sleep that felt like death, I saw that one of the Alhavres riding beside the cart pulled the net from his head, unwrapped the trap scarf, and exposed his face to the rain. The water washed away the crusted mask, revealing ordinary human skin, and for a moment he reminded me of Gulday, a small, skinny trickster who had sold me fish. It was just a fleeting moment. The rider quickly wrapped his head and face in the scarf again, then pulled the net of branches and dry grass back over his head, becoming a Leshen once more. Around that time, both Hone and I began to regain consciousness for good, but we were too sick to even think about escaping. We lay on the small cart, loaded with sacks, as weak as new bones. Around the cart rode 6 strange horsemen, and 2 pack horses followed behind. My head still felt like it was splitting from pain, and my whole body was numbed. But as soon as we began to move, the driver tied the reins, climbed onto the cart, and tied us up one by one, quickly and dispassionately, as if he were preparing animals for the market. Not too roughly, but firmly. There were small loops of rope left between the knots around our ankles and wrists. We could sit and move, but we would only be able to take tiny steps. Worse still, the rope was so cleverly braided that I couldn't even see the knots, and any attempt to struggle with the loops only made them tighten immediately. I had no idea where we were. The cart rolled along a causeway through vast, empty marshlands stretching to the horizon. Dried seaweed garlands hung from the branches of trees, and sometimes the roofs of huts jutted out from the muddy water. We travelled along the edge of the swamps, through mud and rocks, on a path that gradually rose toward a distant chain of gloomy low mountains. The day was overcast, so I didn't even know which direction we were heading. Flocks of blackbirds wheeled above, screaming horribly. The riders didn't stop for a moment. I saw one of them suddenly swing his leg over the horse's back, stand in one stirrup, and relieve himself without dismounting. I didn't even know how long we had been traveling. 2 days? 10? All I knew was that I was still poisoned. My head hurt as if it had been crushed, and I was starving. The strange riders satisfied their hunger while riding, and one of them silently threw a water flask and some sort of bundle. Hone grabbed the flask and, as before in the temple, cautiously dipped his tongue in it first. This time, however, the water was not poisoned. Inside the bundle, we found a few strips of salted, smoke-dried meat, a piece of smoked cheese, and dried-out bread. We shared the food and greedily ate everything down to the last crumb. "So they do eat meat if needed," one of our captors quietly remarked. For the first time, someone of them spoke a word. I did not reply. After some time, the man riding beside us leaned down from his saddle and tossed us 2 dried, wrinkled fruits that he had pulled from somewhere within his clothing. "Chew them slowly," he instructed. "They are very sour, but your headache will go away. You won't get any more numb water, or you would not survive. You'll have to die eventually, but only when the time comes." After that, we fell silent again. Hone and I sat motionless, wedged between the sacks. Hone was cautiously feeling the knots of the rope with his fingers, and I tried best not to look at him at all. I gazed at the endless sea of mud stretching to the horizon, looking as if it had fallen from the sky and covered everything. Twisted dead trees swayed with clumps of seaweed hanging from them, and flocks of birds circled above the bloated carcasses of dead buffaloes, which jutted from the mud like small hills. I chewed the fruit they had given me, hard and fibrous. It was indeed terribly sour, but I had the sense that the pain was starting to ease. In one place, the mud had swallowed an entire herd. All that was visible were forests of horns and raised heads with mouths gaping in ghastly grimace, as if a buffalo had been petrified the moment the sledge engulfed them. I also saw human figures with sticks in their hands, standing stiff in the mud like motionless statues. "There used to be villages here, herds and orchards," said the one who had given us the fruit. "But when wrath of this mother of yours fell, and drought struck the inner circle, terrible storms and rains like never before hit this area. Mudslides came down from the mountains. Few survived. They left, and now they've been sent to the temple fields to chop the dry earth in honor of this goddess of yours." "We are not the followers of the underground," I replied. "Enough!" snarled another rider. "That's enough talk. These aren't people. Put the bags on them." I tried to resist, though it didn't make much sense. The driver hit me once, sharply, right in the solar plexus, knocking the wind out of me, then threw a sack over me, pulling it down to my elbows and tying it with rope. He gave me a swift kick, knocking me onto my face. I heard the scuffing and muffled drone from home. I spent the rest of the journey like a blind, in the darkness and stifling heat, relying only on my hearing. The hoarse cries of birds, the wailing wind, sometimes the snorting of horses, and the soft creaking of well-oiled cartwheels. Nothing else. I don't even know how long it lasted. I lay there, submerged in terror, helplessness and darkness. It felt like an eternity, though we likely arrived at our destination the same day, at night. They ordered us to dismount from the cart without removing the sacks, and led us a steep, rocky path. They did so decisively, brutally and silently, just as they did everything else. Whether these people were bandits or rebels, they did not seem to serve the prophetess. My emotions fluctuated between hope and utter despair. We climbed high, stumbling and falling on sharp rocks. Someone loosened the rope tying my sack at the bottom, so I could see the ground beneath my feet. Taking small steps, as much as the rope allowed, I trudged uphill, no longer falling with every step. When we finally stopped climbing, I was completely exhausted. I was barely breathing, and my chest ached as I was shoved through a narrow opening, and the bag was pulled from my head. It didn't make much difference, though, because the room was still pitch black. I cautiously felt the walls, which were smooth and cold like polished stone. The floor was the same and round, as if I was sitting at the bottom of a dry well, but I couldn't find the door I had been pushed through. Nothing. Just smooth rock. And then I sat there, fumbling with ropes, trying to figure out how to untie them. The knots seemed magical. When I managed to loosen them in one place, they tightened in another. It felt like they had no beginning or end. I spent a lot of time on this, because at the bottom of the well I had nothing but darkness, the tips of my fingers brushing against the ropes, and intricate loops binding my wrists and ankles. It frustrated me because the lassie who had tied me up had done so with an ordinary, not too long piece of rope, and he tied it with one quick, thoughtless movement. I knew they would come for me. They hadn't dragged us all this way just to lock us up and starve us. Finally, I discovered a way, patiently, slowly, as if it was the art of counting without numbers. Just as one finds a way to win at Tarbis, I managed to gradually loosen the knots binding my wrists, slowly, from one side and then from the other. I freed my hands and legs, and the twisted rope in my hands suddenly unraveled, becoming an ordinary piece of leather strap with two ends. After that, I sat against the concave wall, and after a long time I saw stars high above my head. Tiny, silver sparks twinkling in the darkness. So I truly was at the bottom of a well. So I gazed at the stars, just as the monks of Kiranen had done for centuries. Somewhere among them, in the velvet void, lay the path to the Creator. the path that all those I loved had taken. My mother, father, brothers, Aina, Fiala, Tahela, Irisa, who had given her life for mine, lovable. I saw the faces in the void, one after the other. I sat at the bottom of a stone well, somewhere in the desolate wilderness of the northeast, whispering the names of my loved ones and weeping. For the first time, I truly mourned them. I hadn't been able to before, and I feared that when daylight came, I might not get another chance. As if I had betrayed them. They would have left, forgotten, without a single tear from the one who was supposed to carry them in his heart. I sat there for a long time until the black sky above my head began to lighten and turn grey. I could hear that outside life was stirring. Voices, the bellowing of animals, footsteps. The circle of the sky above me finally turned blue, and I still sat in the darkness of the well, waiting. Suddenly, the invisible entrance behind me opened, without a sound, as if the wall itself had vanished. I fell backward, and someone grabbed me by the collar. I was suddenly dragged into the sharp, blinding sunlight that immediately overwhelmed me. They twisted my arm and pulled me along so quickly and firmly that I had no chance to do anything. I just ran, bent in half, blinded by the sun, not knowing where I was going. Beneath my feet, the ground was smooth and polished like glass. No tiles, no stones, just one vast, wide expanse. Everything flashed before me in strange, jarring glimpses like in a dream. I saw we were on a perfectly smooth plateau, that in the distance there was a marshy plain, that the soldiers' tunics were the colors of different regiments, but none of the shields bore the sign of the underground womb. Then there was a narrow step corridor with steps smoothed by centuries of use. They kept twisting my arms. Someone's hand tugged at my collar, and if I didn't keep moving my feet, they would have wrenched my arms from their sockets, like tearing the leg of a roasted bird. At the top there was another wide plateau, just as smooth as a table, and I thought this must be one of the mysterious ancient ruins sometimes found in the wilderness. In the middle stood ancient, blindingly white buildings, most of them looking like game balls, perfectly round and white. At times they seemed to be only partially above ground, sometimes they lay on a stone slab, and sometimes they rose above it on thick, white pillars. I was led to one of the buildings, where two soldiers in helmets and with spears stood in front of a black, circular entrance. They had round shields with no emblem or number of their timon. Then I was shoved inside. I expected darkness, but inside it was bright, as if the spherical building was made of milky glass. There were no windows or lanterns, just a bright light, as if the darkness I had pierced through with my head had been some kind of a curtain. In the middle of the circular floor was a small table, behind which sat an older, balding man with piercing eyes, sitting on a low stool and sipping infusion from a cup. "Welcome, traveler," he said. "Oh, let him go now." I stared at him with amazement. The man was wearing a jacket with clan trimmings and had a Kuranese knife at his belt. He was also puffing on a short pipe with a stone bowl and a flat wooden mouthpiece. "Sit down, boy." He looked at me more closely. "By the holy elements! How old are you? 16 at best?" I nodded. "Cursed war. I had a son your age. The fire of the desert separated us. I don't know if he's alive. Why were they dragging you like this? Did you beat someone up?" I shook my head. "Sit down. Have some brew. I'll order breakfast and another cup. By the way, what would you like for breakfast?" "Excuse me?" I was still too dazed to understand what he meant. "Breakfast, boy. That simple morning meal by which you can tell if you are among civilized people or barbarians." whether you found yourself in a good place or a bad one. If somewhere they don't eat breakfast at all, or just finish scraps from the dinner, it's no good. And if somewhere you're not allowed to eat certain things or do various everyday things, then you are landed under the rule of tyrants, and you'll know this at breakfast. If gods or king interfere even in what common man eats in the morning, then they will surely interfere in everything, and living in such place will be a hard task. My advice: first, look at breakfast when you find yourself in foreign lands and among strangers. If you can eat well, drink a cup of tea, and smoke a pipe of bacchum, then you're among good people. If no one is surprised when you take a glass of spiced beer or ambrosia with your pipe after breakfast, you're among honorable and free people. If even that's not allowed, you'd better run if you can. It means you're not allowed to speak or think either. We have as much freedom as pertains to ourselves. When that is taken from us, soon we will be turned into animals. We eat all sorts of things. We have no superstitions, although it's said one should have a light meal in the morning. White foods: milk, cheese, bread, eggs, cold meats or fish, pastes, fruits, whatever one wants. But we are monsters. We enslave our women and seize the wealth of the earth. We are captured and murdered in towers or driven to fields to work until we collapse from exhaustion. The emitragi only eat what the code allows, depending on the case, just enough to survive. The military can even taste meat, though rarely and not necessarily for breakfast. So, what should I have brought for you? Water and overcooked dura without a pinch of salt or milk? A dry slice of bread? You wear the robes of a cinder, so you are a devout emitragi, respectful of tradition and obedient, well-born, though not necessarily really wealthy. But let's take a look at the scroll. He unrolled the scroll on the table and pointed to something with the stem of his pipe. Literally just a moment ago you were a priest, a caste higher, though only an acolyte but still an enlightened. Do you know that, according to the rules, during travel you are allowed to eat even bean cakes and drink diluted milk? So what should I order for breakfast, boy? A breakfast for a cinder or for a priest? I'm a 5th rank official, Sitterbahan, a poor cinder. I just want to return to my family home. Before the prophetess came, I lived in Maranhar and ate all sorts of things, not just what the code says. Those are different times. Where is my uncle? Let me see him. Your companion has yet to wake up, the man said. In the meantime, let's have breakfast. I'm sure you two meet soon. I felt a pang of fear. There was something ominous in the casual tone of my seemingly carefree conversation partner. Could Hone already be dead? Just like that? You're a very interesting man, boy. Your uncle is a high-ranking priest. You were traveling by cart, and when you were attacked, you killed 6 armed men. Then suddenly you dressed in the robes of cinders. Why? If you are, as you say, a low-ranking official, why were you traveling in the garments of the temple servants of Yakmother? I pressed my fists to the ground and touched my forehead to the floor. Sitterbahan, my uncle is unwell. When he came to Maranar to get me, he caught swamp fever on the way. Sometimes the illness overcomes him, and then he doesn't know what he's doing. Those priests were killed on the trail. We came across the cart and the bodies. My uncle insisted it was a sign from the Arkmother and dressed in the temple garb. He was adamant that it was the only way we could pass the bridge in Asheridan. That's why we later discarded the disguise. What is your name, boy? My name is Arjuk Hattermal Sitterbahan. I come from Karmisar. My uncle's name stands in Birtalai. Have some tea, Arjuk. Your uncle is also a fascinating man. He traveled all the way from the Kamir Mountains to the capital, across a country scorched by the worst drought in generations, yet somehow managed to catch swamp fever. Where on earth did he find swamp in this weather? I'm no healer, Sitterpahan, but he may have drank some foul water along the way. The Imperials warned us such water harbors diseases. The man leaned forward and poured me some tea into a cup. The smoke from his pipe smelled faintly of ambrosia and smoked plums. Then where did you get those spice sticks, Erjuk? They are pretty rare. Hard to buy at the bazaar, even if normal trade still existed. And it's difficult to learn how to fight with them. Is that the part of training for a 6th-rank official now? My uncle trained in the heavy infantry. He trained with me with the staff because the roads are dangerous. And the sticks were in the priest's cut. We didn't know they were the sticks of a spy, and I'm a 5th-rank official, not 6th. I can read and write. Haha, but your uncle, a heavy infantry soldier, killed 3 people, one of them with an arrow from a distance. You, in the meantime, killed 2 in a fight with just that stick. At one point you didn't even have a stick, bare hands against 2 archers, while your uncle held only an iron amulet on a chain. And you knew exactly where the spear and the sword were. Who were those attackers? There was an iron chest in the cut, Sitterpahan. The bandits knew about it, but we didn't. Inside, however, there was something terrible that cursed the whole area. I saw it with my own eyes. A tray of breakfast was brought in. Pickled vegetables, salted cheese, bread, milk. A few strips of dried meat. I accepted a cup of nut infusion and took a sip. You haven't had a decent meal in a long time, boy. How long have you been on the road? I've lost track of time, Sitterpahan. We fled Maranhar on the night of the Old Faith, when the army sided with the Underground Mother. By canoe down the river. Then we walked for many days. So, you fled suddenly? Yes, but we were going to leave that very day anyway. My uncle came for me because my father had fallen ill. That's why we had travel papers. Wait. You had travel papers, yet you still chose to avoid checkpoints and dress as a priest? Those papers were issued before the uprising, sir. We didn't know if they were still valid. Same with the passports, they are still imperial. But, just a moment, boy. During the reign of the late emperor, you could travel without travel papers, the man said. How could 2 Sindars have known that Code of Earth would suddenly return? It felt like a game. The man asked innocent questions, but I constantly had the feeling that he was cornering me. If you lived in Maranhar during the draft, I said slowly, it was something you could feel in the air. We were very scared. We are poor people. The priests intimidated the whole district. Sometimes they stood at the gates. We went to the temple and got papers like in the old days because we had just left. Those at the gates would have thought we are disrespecting the code and the teachings of the prophetess, that we were loyal to the imperial law. The man smiled. He reached into a basket beside the table and pulled out the eye of an off. I opened my mouth, but didn't manage to say anything. Haha, if I asked you now what it is, you'll say, oh, it's been my family for years, it belonged to my grandfather who traded with desert caravan travelers. I'll then ask how a Sindar could have lowered himself to trade, and you'll shamefully say that in desert settlements things are a bit different far from the inner circle and you had to leave somehow. Eat, boy, eat. Do you often eat Kirenese-style meals? No, Sitterpahan. And yet you know that pickled lambach doesn't go well with cheese, but it's excellent with meat. You paired the cheese in turn with chopped rat leaf instead. I would have done the same. Do you know you could easily pass as a Kirenese? The ease which you reach for meat, one might think you've never heard that those who eat the bodies of the children of Yev have their blood thickened. Eat, boy, eat. I looked him straight in the eyes. I'm not pretending to be a Kirenese, Sitterpahan. I don't know why we were kidnapped. Please allow us to go home. I haven't eaten in days, that's all. Eat, boy, eat. One must savor every good moment the world offers us. We must appreciate that the Creator's world still has such moments for us, even though it is full of people. We must cherish the little things. Now you are eating breakfast, and soon you'll know nothing but pain and suffering. That's the way of the world, boy, and there's nothing we can do about it. I'm not lying, Sir Pahan, I said again firmly. My interlocutor was jovial and friendly, yet he filled me with dread. After his last sentence, I began to feel genuine terror. Oh, but you are, my poor boy. You lie in every sentence, and you lie well. You have been taught how to craft a fable. You see, boy, it's easy to believe in any single thing you've told me, but not all of them together. Sometimes even the best fable won't help. Let's take this point. You're a cinder. Your uncle is older, so you owe him absolute obedience. Yet, when you feared being poisoned, it was your uncle who tested the water like a servant. And so on, boy. You can't outsmart pain. You can't outlast it. It's not like being beaten or having a finger cut off. It will be a terrible pain, but it can be endured, especially if you deeply believe in something. But what happens in circumstances like yours goes beyond comprehension. They should have told you. They really should have. No one can withstand it. The only thing you can do is spare yourself part of what's coming. Death is not the worst thing, boy. Right now, you think it is, but you'll soon realize that death might be a reward. What's the difference, Sita Pahan? I asked. In what, boy? Between people. Amitraji and Kiranis. The Wild Kabiri and Kiranis. Between the priests of the Arkmother who feed her statue and the honorable Kiranis who kidnap people on the roads to torment them? Necessity, son. There are so few of us left. We flee wherever we can, but still, there are few of us. Amitrajis can return to the old faith. They can stay quiet and obedient, but we are slaughtered without mercy. There are settlements where Kiranis are killed to the last one, even infants, before the order is given. The goal is to erase any trace of a cursed Tenjarok dynasty. Their neighbors do it, hoping they'll be spared in turn, out of fear. They don't know that their Nadak will never be satisfied, that there are no more of us. It will just as readily devour its own children. Few survived. And if you succeed in doing what you were sent to do, there will be none left. I won't even ask what were you supposed to do, traveling to the edges of the empire as a cinder or priest, prepared to pretend to be a Kiranese at any moment. It's obvious. You were sent to find us. I'm only interested in how many more of you there are. Like you. How many cinders, Kiranese and priests at once, who know all the customs of the empire, who masterfully wield the spice staff, poison and blade. We spread rumors about ourselves. We want people to think and flee if they can. But we don't want them to know anything for sure. Not until we are ready. So we resort to barbarian methods only when there's no other choice. Just like a small, skinny dog that, when cornered, can even kill. Because it's terrified and has its back against the wall. And we know full well we are tainting our own fate and the fate of our children, that such actions bring a hereditary curse. But the stakes are the survival of the few left in this camp and those few still trying to reach us. Only that. They, on the other hand, use such methods for any reason or no reason at all. That is the difference, boy. But even if I were a spy tracking you, I don't even know where I am. Because it's us who brought you here. If you had come here like other refugees, if you had found us yourselves, you'd know. But how many more are there, boy? How many? Where are they? Where they are traveling? A terrible silence fell. For a moment, I frantically tried to think of something to say, but my mind was blank. From somewhere far away, a scream suddenly reached me. A terrifying voice that seemed familiar. It sounded like home. Suddenly, a sharp, stabbing pain pierced through my skull, like being struck by a lightning. I screamed. I wanted to move, to look behind me, but I couldn't. My body was like a statue. I could feel it, every muscle, but it wouldn't move. "There's a needle in your skull, boy," said the man as he poured himself more tea. From behind me, a man in a loose black robe with a hood silently appeared. His face was like night. He looked like a piece of darkness, a scrap of soot, like an animated moving clock. He placed a large cup full of gleaming, hair-thin wires on the table. I saw a very thin, sinewy hand the color of copper, covered in shallow scars. My interrogator pulled one of the needles and showed it to me. "One can barely be seen. It's as thin as spider's thread, yet harder than steel, harder than diamond. It pierces the skull as easily as through an apple. One of them is now lodged deep in your head, right here." He touched the back of his own head, just above the nape of his neck. The black spectre behind me selected a handful of the gleaming needles and carefully arranged them between the fingers of one hand. "That is why you can't move anything except your eyes, mouth, and tongue. You can only speak and look. The insertion of the needle doesn't hurt too much," he sighed. "The issue is where it's placed. That man, the hooded figure, is a man from Kebir. His name is Ngwemba. He usually heals people with his needles, but he also knows where pain, sorrow, terror, and fear dwell in a person's head. He also knows how to make you feel like your eyes are being scalded with boiling oil, or as if your leg is being devoured by insects. All it takes is a needle. He's sitting behind you now and has already inserted 6. Soon you'll look like a porcupine. And then, with just a slight touch to one of them, you'll feel as if you are being buried alive, or like you're watching your little daughter being raped. And it will go on, endlessly. It's like playing a sitar, the sitar of suffering. The muslin of his hood isn't there to terrify you. It's there so you don't see that Ngwemba himself is also crying. Though I won't say he suffers as much as you do. That would not be true. No one will suffer as much. If I were simply shackled with chains, I think I would have broken free. But these were not chains. It was a thin, silver needle lodged in my head. I sat motionless like a statue, but in my mind I thrashed around like a madman, like a dying, terrified horse. Then Ngwemba lightly touched one of the needles. The one that held the grief of losing a beloved woman. A world that ceased to be a world and became an unbearable burden. A hollow, ashen place of exile. And then the one that contained the fire burning deep in my guts. A handful of swallowed hot coals, the stench of burning hair, the sound of teeth scraping across glass. The screams of infants burning alive. I think my own scream shattered the stone dome. "We Kiranese believe that such a deed places a curse on a person's life," the man said. "It's called Gohanmi, the debt of harm. I will repay for what I've done to you, and later my children will pay for it as well. Until the harm is fully repaid, I will pay it with grief, with sickness, with misfortune. But perhaps, because of this, the people of Kiranen will survive. Maybe they won't be slaughtered just because they don't believe in the underground mother and the idea that everything must become one. Maybe, just maybe, they'll defend their right to live in their own way. That's my Agirano, my duty, which I have taken up upon myself. Forgive me. Now tell me, how many of you are there?" "I'm not a temple spy," I screamed at the top of my lungs. The thought of the black figure behind me raising his hands to my head filled me with madness. "I'm Kyrenes! I'm the Emperor!" The man at the table grimaced in pain, bowed his head, and closed his eyes. And then Ngwemba lightly touched several needles again. Pain is like a dark, black-red sun, a disgusting small sun that doesn't illuminate the darkness. It is eternal, and it stings. How were you supposed to pass the messages to the temple? How many more are like you? Where did you hear about us? What were you supposed to do when you arrived here? It lasted forever. "Remove the needles, Ngwemba," the man said in a weary tone. "Take out all of them, except the one that paralyzes him. But insert 2 more. Let him be at peace, and take away his ability to feel pain. I can't bear this any longer. I've asked all my questions 3 times. That is enough. I don't know how they did it, but even I can bear more. Go harm me." He reached to his belt and drew his clan knife. "Enough, boy," he whispered. "It's over. There will be no more pain. I'm old, weak, and I can't take it any longer. I have failed my people, and I have failed you because I tortured you in vain." "Enough!" another faceless man shouted, appearing suddenly as if he had grown out of the floor. He was entirely clad in gleaming armor, like a being made of liquid metal. "Enough of this madness! You are bringing a curse upon us all." "This is not madness, Reverend," said the first man, folding his hands and bowing his head. "War is cruel. For us, just as it is for them. We live in the world, not in the heavens. If this poor boy does what he's been trained to do, they'll wipe us out to the last person. Along with your orphans. No one will be left alive here." "Remove the needles," the steel-clad man ordered sternly. His outfit was made of tiny interlocking rings, covering his entire body, including his face. I could see him clearly, still sitting motionless like a statue. For a long time, I had already died from pain and misery, and then I started dreaming of death, and finally I fell in love with it. Exactly as the first man had said. I kept waiting for the blade of death as if for a lover's kiss. I don't know why I saw everything so sharply. I felt the weight of every ring shimmering on armored man's body, each link of his chainmail cascading down to the ground. "Take out the needles and help him recover. Give him fresh clothes and water. Let him wash. Let him drink ambrosia. When his mind returns, take him to the Tohimon, and let no one dare harm him." "Reverend," the first man interrupted firmly. "He's not a spy. He's the one I dreamed about. I'll be waiting. When the boy regains his senses, I'll guide him myself. And you fall on your face and pray to your ancestors whom you have disgraced." Ngwemba removed the needles one by one. Each brought me relief, but still, every time his hand approached my head, a spasm of terror shot through me. When the last needle was pulled out, I collapsed to the side, completely limp. My clothes were soaked with sweat. I had wet myself, and I was trembling uncontrollably. It took a long time before I could move again. I pushed myself up to my knees. "What's your name?" I asked the man at the table. I didn't recognize my own voice. It was hoarse and broken. "I am not son of a birdcatcher. I come from the Water Clan." "When the war is over, you son of a birdcatcher, when the Kyrenes are free, I will find you, and I will kill you." "What you said under torture?" Yes, it's true. I am Kai Tohimon of the Crane Khan, known by the Amitraji name Terkei Tenjeruk, Lord of the Tiger Throne. the fiery banner, the master of the world, and the first rider. But I will find you not as an emperor. I will find you as pillar, son of a spearmaker. I will come to your home with a mark of vengeance painted on my face in my own blood, with a knife in my hand. I will plant the banner of the Crane clan in your courtyard, and kill you at the feet of your children. I dream of a day that happens, son of a spearmaker, Not replied, bowing his head. For if that day comes, it will mean I have won, and the atrocities I committed here were not in vain. For now, just give me water and clothes. I snarled, looking at my still trembling hands. I felt more exhausted than I had ever been. And then leave. I don't want to see you. Not didn't just send water. He also sent 2 slave women, who brought a bucket, towels, and a basin of soapwort. When they arrived, I sat curled up, shaking and crying. They washed me gently, while I remained indifferent and limp. When one of them dried my head with a towel, I noticed tiny dots of blood on it, the marks from stings where thin needles had pierced my skull. Later, the girls brought a sash, a shirt, trousers, a tunic, and boots. Kyrenees clothing, which I hadn't worn since my place burned down. The man in the warrior monk attire sat before the dome in a meditative position, head bowed, motionless. He was clearly waiting for me. Then he stood, rested his glaive on his shoulder, and silently led me across the perfectly level plateau between 2 rows of clan banners fluttering in the wind. "Don't tell anyone who you are," he said. "Not me, not the Tohimon. You are the fate-bearer, and it's too easy to change what is meant to happen. So what should I say?" "The truth, but only the part of it that is absolutely necessary." The commander sat in another dome, on a saddle set against the wall like a throne. He was a slender man with aristocratic face and a mane of grey hair. He wore trousers and a tunic in the colors of the 20th Timon, with a Kyrenees tunic of a rock clan over it. In his hand, resting on his thigh, he held a small cup, and at his feet lay a gourd of palm wine. He had one finger in his mouth, prodding a tooth with concern. The room contained only a small table with a map spread on it, another table with cups, and a few blankets on the floor. Along the curved wall, I noticed a wooden rack holding a heavy cavalry armor and an old Kyrenees helmet with a deep neck guard, a front visor, and cheek protectors. I clasped my fist with my head and bowed slightly. "Kai Tohimon." He gave a curt nod. I sat on one of the blankets, hugging myself. I was still trembling, my teeth chattering. I didn't want to talk to anyone or know anything. At that moment, I just wanted to curl up and cry. "So, this is your fate-bearer," he addressed the monk. The monk nodded, his chainmail rustling. "There were supposed to be 2 of them." "There's still my companion, Tohimon, but I don't know if he's alive. Please, let me see him. I know he's being tortured with Kebric needles like I was." "I stopped it," said the monk behind his gleaming veil. "I stopped it immediately when I learned that the trackers had brought in 2 men captured from the Ashirdem track. But your companion is an Amitraji, a priest of an underground mother named Undai Chekedei." I shook my head. "That's Hone, son of a wormwooder. Along the way, he had to pretend to be the priest Chekedei, and in the temple, he took the sting of a strange scorpentine altered by the power of a charm spot. It was some sort of a ritual. That's when his mind became confused. 2 people now live inside his head, Chekedei, whom he invented, and himself." "Hone has died because of your needles," my voice broke. There was silence. The warrior monk reached into his chainmail and pulled out a small curled gourd. "Take small sips, boy. Keep sipping until you feel better. Your friend is not dead." "The Kabiri can heal him," said the Tohimon. "That dog will never touch him again." "He's not the one to blame," the monk said. "He's just a tool. A knife can cut out a tumor or pierce a heart. All depends on who wields it. Curse us, those who held the handle, not the lifeless blade. These Kabiri can heal on a daily basis, and their needles can work wonders. I know it's hard for you, boy, but try to trust us. We have people here who have been through horrors so terrible that they lost their minds. My powers, prayers, and herbs couldn't help them, but the Ngwemba's needles restored their sanity and peace. We will care for your companion, especially since it was our fault he was harmed." "I am Candlewick, son of the blacksmith, Kai Tohimon of the Rock Clan," the man sitting on the saddle throne suddenly declared. We had ignored him. "I lead the remnants of our people, mostly refugees from various military units and some civilians. Women, children, the elderly. It seems like many when we have to feed and water everyone. But if the Amitraji find us, it will become clear that we are just a handful. Not and his trackers ensure that temple spies don't find us, and they do it well. They are rarely wrong. But my friend here, the enlightened warrior named Gloom, is also rarely wrong. One says you are a mortal danger and should be eliminated. The other says you are the one who can change our fate and help us survive. Whom should I believe, boy? What do you have to say?" Gloom slid his hands under his chainmail and pulled out a prayer cylinder. I watched as he deftly rotated the rings, moving the stones covered with symbols around the axis and between the rings, forming a new pattern. He managed to align the stones. Perhaps he would read the answer from them. "I don't know what it means to be the Fate Bearer. I am Pillar, son of the Spearmaker from the Crane clan. On the night the Tiger throne fell, I received a mission from the Emperor. I'm just trying to fulfill it. However, I do not understand its purpose, nor I do grasp its meaning. The Lord of the Tiger Throne simply ordered me to reach a certain place, but he did not reveal why. He did not command me to meet anyone, nor to deliver any message, nor actually anything at all. I think that now, since the first rider has perished and the imperial dynasty is no more, I should stay here. Stand by your side, Tohimon. I am Kiranese, and my place is here. I am also the only living courtier of the Emperor. That might help bring more people under your banner, especially those from the Crane clan who have survived." "The Imperial Court," Candlewick mused. Gloom continued to turn. Hear the clicking of the tokens. So-called Kiranese dynasty, founded by the inverted crane. Later, the Tenjarok dynasty. These are Amitraji matters, Pillar. We Kiranese don't have a single ruler over us all. We don't have emperors. The Crane clan is no better than the Dog, Ice, or Stream clan. That's how it was before, and that's how it is again. Time flows and life comes full circle. Everything changes, only to become the same again. I don't want to be an emperor. I am only the first among equals, guild commander of the remnants. If we survive, I will return to my place, of my clan and nowhere else. "We still exist," said the monk, still turning the rings in his hand and moving the stones. "Even though our country was conquered, even though we've been assigned to low castes, had our names changed and our language taken from us. If even took our land, and yet we still exist. We survived because generations ago the right of a question was held. When we were conquered, Arrowhead, son of a netmaker, Kaidoimon of a Crane clan, the same who later called himself Tahladin Tenjarug, not betray us. Did what the knowers, those who had survived the right, commanded him to do. He was ordered to join the enemy and create the imperial dynasty, whether he or his descendants, for he, too, was a fate-bearer. Fulfilled his fate, and through his descendant as an emperor, we could be reborn. If the Kiranese Tenjarug dynasty had not arisen Candlewick, we would now be nameless slaves of the lowest castes. There would be no clans, no language. The fact that you were born into a Kiranese family, that you were given names, and that you had parents, that you wore a clan knife and tunic all your life, you owe all to that traitor emperor. Candlewick shrugged and took a sip of wine. Maybe, but those times have passed. I no longer have home or family like all of us. All that's left are my names, my knife, and my tunic. Now we are being hunted and killed, and the unfortunate emperor is dead. What use could he be to us? Amitraji don't really miss him, and we don't need him. Am I supposed to storm the capital with this handful of people and reclaim the Tiger Throne? Who even needs it? Who would I place on it? How could I hold it? How could I get the Amitraji to turn away from the prophetess? What we need is a place where we can live, and that's all. If you want the same, son of a spearmaker, if you are Kiranese and can forgive what we've done to you, then stay. I need every pair of hands. Every person who doesn't want to live in the Arkmother's world and knows how to wield the sword. Especially if that's what fate demands. I trust Gloom. If he says you are a tool of fate and can help us survive, then I believe it too. Enough, Gloom interrupted. That's not how it works. It can only be the fate-bearer is destined to do. Fate is in motion like water on oak. It's not a single line we are slaves to. There are inevitable events, but not so many, and they concern things that will happen soon. He must do what he must. I don't know what that is, but I believe it has to do with following the will of the Emperor. You lived in the palace. He turned to me. Were the knowers there? They were said to be, I replied, but I never saw any of them. I am one of the knowers. Loom explained, and although I can't explain why, I believe that on the night of the storm, the right of the question took place. I felt it. Many died then, first from the power of the right, then by the sword. When things become final, it's possible to try and seek answers, just as was done after the defeat in the Valley of Black Terrors. Circle of connected knowers become, for a moment, a single powerful mind. For a brief time, it reveals the paths of the future, uncovering what is hidden. Many of them die, and many pay for it with madness. The answer isn't always clear. Like a command given to a young boy to wander to the edge of the world without knowing why. The thing is, only when you get there you do find out the purpose. Did the Emperor normally give such orders? Never, I said. Every one of his men always knew what they were doing and why. And where were you headed now, when you were traveling the Ashuridim road? The town of Nahigil, near Saragar, to the desert of the end of the world. And that is where you should go. And we should do everything to get you there. You cannot stay here. There's something else, Tohimon. Something you saw in your visions in the shape of smoke and flowing water? Candlewick asked. Yes, death follows him. I saw it in visions. It walks in his footsteps and it's already too close. I don't know what it means. Death follows us all. Sometimes it's right at the threshold. Nothing new. So, what do you propose? Let us heal his companion. Equip them for the journey and give them a few people to lead them to the Nahigil as quickly as possible. Guides and protectors. Let them not stray and let no one stand in the way. They must reach where they need to go and as soon as possible. And what benefit is there in that? Especially for those who stay here. Maybe we'll find out when he gets where he's supposed to. That's how it is with the right of a question. Maybe it's about him meeting someone. Or maybe he'll just nudge a pebble that will later become an avalanche. Or maybe he'll become the spark that ignites a fire. The answer the knowers received is not a prophecy, only a chance. Perhaps a very small one, but we need every chance we can get. So, I'm supposed to give him a few of my precious men and lead him to the edge of the desert, even though he doesn't know why or for what reason. Because maybe in the palace the knowers performed some kind of ritual, and as a result of that ritual, maybe, just maybe, there was a vision that no one understands, but fulfilling it might give us a chance to survive. Did I get it correct, Gloom? I am a commander. I look at what's in front of me. These are the people who trusted me. They believe I know better than others what to do. What matters to me are spears, sacks of durat, horses and swords. I can count them and say, here, there's a chance. Or there's not. I live on the earth and look at the earth, Gloom. I see things that matter and things that don't. I don't chase the wind, dreams or moonlight. I don't meddle with matters of Nadaku and the curses of charm spots. I believe in the Creator, but he is far away. He made people free, and because of that he cannot help us. Because then we would stop deciding for ourselves. That's why there's evil in the world, and that's why there are Amitraji. There are also blades and hands to resist them. Those are the things I understand. A real shame, then, but the prophetess doesn't think like you, Gloom replied from behind his mail-clad veil. If she had looked at the Imperial army, if she had counted the blades and sacks of Dura, she would probably never have left her desert hermitage. But she preferred to chase the wind and moonlight, to trust in dreams. And now her dreams must be everyone's dreams, all the way to the endless sea, Kebir and Nassim. Another sip from his wooden flask. The drink inside smelled strongly of roots and herbs, had a strange taste, but wasn't as harsh as ambrosia. My hands were no longer trembling, and slowly I was sinking into indifference. Not peace, but indifference. Darkness had settled inside me, seemed to shrink, but it remained darkness, a black, bleak void. Maybe I'll do as you suggest, Reverend, the commander finally said. Or maybe not. I need to think. When I decide, you'll know. Find Boy a place to stay and make sure his friend is healed. Tohimon? Yes, Boy. I don't know how far it is from here, nor how much time has passed, but I know something that may be important, I said. Candlewick looked at me with a steady, wary gaze. In the village of Ashurdim, there are few priests, only a handful. There's one old knower who might be dangerous. The Archmatron, however, has no real power. She cannot do, nor does she know how to rule. She only guards the bridge and detains many travelers. Some she kills in the temple, and some she sends to building granaries. Among them are Kiranese and other people who are fleeing from the power of the Archmother and the Red Towers. The whole town, however, is overrun with dura and herds of cattle, which the priestess refuses to give up to the high houses because she fears becoming dependent on them. This is all guarded by barely a binon of infantry and a on of Perseid cavalry, the drivers. They are from the Viper Timon, bored, and their morale is super low. There's also a temple guard, maybe an on or two at most. A ragtag bunch, bandits and deserters. Moreover, there's a charm spot on the road, a few stops past the bridge. I know because I saw it with my own eyes. That's all. I thought that if I were at Pahandey or at Timon Bazaar, I would want to know about it. And what would you do if you knew? Well, maybe I'd send a binon of light cavalry and as many carts as I could find. I'd take the town, burn the tower, free the people and take the supplies. And from the Archmatron, I'd find out the workings of a new drum language. Since I last saw the time, many things may have changed, and you may think I'm lying. In that case, a few scouts could quickly find the truth, and the light cavalry can scatter and retreat if things go wrong. Candlewick smiled faintly and nodded. Then he looked me in the eyes. Despite your young age, you think like a commander should. I'm wondering who you really are, son of a spearmaker. But tell me one thing. How would you make the Archmatron reveal the drum language to you? Would you ask her kindly? Intimidate her? Heat up some irons to the whiteness? Or would you order Gwemba to drive needles into her head? I remained silent. The monk rose with a rustle of armor and grasped my arm. Come on, let's go. The blinding sun shone under the vast blue sky. From the top of a strange flat hill we could see the distant horizon fading into the luminous mist. Endless muddy wasteland and gentle hills loomed on one side, while on the other a dry barren plain covered with shrubs and rocks stretched all the way to the distant, reddish-green peaks of the mountains. You never really wanted to stay with us, did you? Bloom asked. Talking to someone constantly hidden behind a shimmering veil was frustrating. Monk had no face. There was no way to know if he was smiling, mocking, or speaking seriously. There was only his voice. I looked at him, but said nothing. You simply thought you should, that this was your place. Meanwhile, everything that happened to you and your friend has made you unsure if you even want to be Kyrenese anymore. And what else I could be? I asked. I'm Kyrenese, no matter what I think or how I feel. I'm a more Kyrenese than you might imagine. Maybe more than anyone here. It's my nature. It's not something you can choose. Oh yes, but I think the only hope that sustains you now is the belief that there are still many others who act differently than we do. Those who hold on to the principles of civilization and the code of war. That we here are the twisted ones. You must have fled across the country and witnessed things that should never have happened. You watched and thought, somewhere out there is another world. My people are still there, and they would never act this way. There was once such a land. If only I could find my way back to them, if only I could find my true homeland. And now that you've found it, the first thing you experience is unforgivable cruelty from your own people. Oh, stop whining, Reverend, I growled. You are a holy man, but you talk like an Amitraji. 1 minute this way, the next that, sometimes you're sorry, and the other times you see yourself as a righteous one. Way like a flag in the wind, depending on how you feel. You've decided that in your situation, it's acceptable to extract information through torture, so don't pretend now that it's unforgivable. It's forgivable because you decided it was necessary. War is the triumph of necessity. True men of Kyrenen thinks before deciding, and once they do, cannot undo it. He must face his choice. You decided to do something that will taint your Gohanmi and be unworthy. You chose to bear that burden because the stakes were high, and maybe it was indeed necessary. So lift your head and carry the weight you've chosen. Don't ask for my forgiveness, because just an hour ago I was shitting myself out of pain and fear. Fell silent because Gloom laid his glaive on the ground and, with a clatter, bowed his head covered in mail before me. Daimassa, Tohimon. Matage, I muttered. Then I heard a faint jingling of steel rings. The monk's head trembled slightly, and I thought he was crying, but then I suddenly realized Gloom was soundlessly laughing. Are you mocking me? I asked. No, son of a spearmaker. But your rebuke was so natural, so unexpected from the mouth of a boy. You're used to giving orders, and for a long time at that. Be careful with it. It's the easiest path to giving yourself away. Of course, you would be right, if not for a misunderstanding. I was only saying that I know what you feel, and what I would feel in your place. I see the world differently from normal people. Like every monk, I am a little mad. I see connections. You see connections? Actually, I sense them. Between things, people, and purposes. They are as delicate as thread that can be severed, but they are still visible. Easy to break them and go against fate. Since the fall of a tiger throne, you've been trudging through hostile land. You're on a mission that makes no sense to you. Alone among enemies. If you had come among us and had not been wronged by us, maybe you would have stayed. You found your people, and what we do makes simple, easy to accept sense. We want to survive. We want to defend. You would have simply stood by our side. That seems much wiser than a hopeless journey for an unclear purpose. You would have simply broken the threads. But now, I think you'd rather return to the path and continue your mission. You've been wronged, so you wouldn't hesitate. You'll go where the lines of fate lead you. That's how a man's mind sometimes works. It would be for the round entrance of yet another pearly, spherical building. Rest, said the priest. I had your belongings placed here, and I've sent for some tea. There's a sleeping mat, blankets, and a lamp. Someone will bring you something to eat. Where can I find home? I want to see him. He waved his hand, gesturing somewhere beyond the edge of a plateau, as if to say that home had flown south. He's on the first level, where my infirmary is, but right now he's in deep sleep. I gave him herbs. He won't wake up until tomorrow around noon. I'll take you to him then. I was left alone. Alone in the round, empty building, resembling a giant upside-down soup bowl, illuminated by a bright glow, as if a stone from which it was made shone through like thin paper. In the peacetime, no one had approached the ancient ruins. Strange things happened in them. Lights and voices would appear, doorways would sometimes close, and the buildings would shift. Demons were seen. Widely believed that in the ruins were paths. But now there was war, and the bizarre, sometimes terrifying structures of forgotten peoples had simply become shelters. Nothing more. There were far worse things in the world than ancient demons, and at least here, the rain didn't fall on your head. For a long time, I sat on the rolled map and stared blankly outside. A perfectly even plateau dotted with spherical buildings, where people bustled about. The Kiranese. My people. I don't know where I had got the idea that once I found my fellow countrymen, I would lead them. Just a remnant of a Crane clan. Barely a boy. Even if I told them who I was, the time of the tiger throne has passed. An emperor without his palace, without soldiers, and without subjects who believed in his rule was nothing. Just an ordinary man. Someone had placed my travel basket against the wall. I was glad the trackers had taken it, though it made sense. They had been watching us all day because we seemed odd, suspicious. So the things we had with us mattered too. They took them to inspect, but it was still nice that they returned them to us. Carefully took everything out of a basket and laid it out on the mat. It calmed me, giving me the illusion of purposeful action. Nothing was missing, except that some of the supplies had spoiled, so I threw them away. Then I realized that it was indeed my basket, and not one of the home. The clothes were my size, and I even found my wishbone. For a moment I stared at it, wondering why I didn't feel like crying. It felt as though my heart has dried up into stone and hardened like clay. I set the ball gently aside and caressed the spy stick, the sword, chain, and spear blade, which could also be used as a knife. The glued weapon shaft, disguised as a staff, broke down into several parts. I took one of my straps and cleaned the blades, then found a small ceramic whetstone and brought the weapon back to proper condition. I poured a little oil from the lamp and lubricated the edges, then reassembled the staff back into one place. If I had a sack and some oak sawdust, I would have cleaned the chain too. I went through all my belongings, one item after another, meticulously, as if preparing for something. I spent most of the day this way. I couldn't remember the last time I didn't have to either run or hide. I didn't actually have to do anything. For the first time in what seemed like just as long, I was truly alone. Holmes' company had never been a burden, but we had become inseparable. I felt as if his constant presence was consuming my thoughts, as if I were gradually losing myself. Now, no one was hunting me and I was alone. So I sat there with my hands resting on my knees, staring ahead. From time to time, I sipped the medicine from the flask the monk warrior had given me. It filled me with an indifferent, calm emptiness, as if I was turning into stone. I liked that. I didn't feel like talking to anyone or seeing anyone. I didn't feel like doing anything at all. The herbal brew worked, though now and then the memory of this morning would resurface, and I would be overwhelmed by a bone-chilling terror, as cold as frost. It lasted only for a moment, when I would curl up and shiver, but then the herbs would once again soothe my mind, gently, like a lullaby. I spent a lot of time that way, dozing off, waking up, trembling in panic attacks, or staring blankly ahead. Nothing was happening, yet I felt like this was exactly what I needed. I heard distant conversations, children's calls, the bellowing of animals, the sounds of everyday hustle, but I listened to it with little interest. I were an animal or an object, a stone, a wooden post. I didn't dream, I didn't yearn, and very unusually for me, I didn't even desire a woman's body. Simply lay on the mat as if I were healing. Slowly, I was regaining myself. The past months, I had been a wandering cinder, an adept, an emperor, then again an imperial messenger or a tohimon of a crane clan. Slowly, I no longer knew who I truly was. Pilar, son of a spearmaker. Terkei Denjaruk. Kiren Kisaldim. Arjuk Hatarmal. So many names, so many different people. Each one was different. Which one was truly me? Which one was I? Was I at all? I didn't even know how old I really was. Time counted from the day of birth was one thing, but the time one actually lived was something yet another. Months sometimes flowed faster, sometimes slower. A few days could become like entire years. Days, even hours, could change a person forever. At other times, nothing happened, and even though time passed, it felt like it stood still. Man learns nothing, just lasts. Nothing changes. I was still almost a child, yet I had experienced more than many adults. If I had been a merchant's son somewhere under my father's rule, I would barely have grown out of childhood. I would be only interested in girls, dancing, and night games in the taverns. Still love flying kites and carving ships from wood, or playing the sitar. I probably wouldn't have blood on my hands, perhaps not even have survived a proper fight. My greatest worries would have been the tedious lessons of a craft or the strictness of a teacher. Height of the suffering would be a girl's indifference, a sprained ankle, or a toothache. If I had still lived in the Tiger Palace, I would be one of the heirs to the throne, helping with administration, feeling the weight of the fate of millions of subjects on my shoulder. I'd live immersed in imperial matters and, in many ways, would have to be more grown up than an ordinary 16-year-old. However, I was still too weak to bear the burden of the fate that had now befallen me. I lacked the calm, the wisdom, and the resilience of people in their prime. On the other hand, I managed somehow and could recover faster than they could. I lay there for hours, alternating between sleep and staring blankly ahead, soaking in the silence. Didn't even want to think about how many times over the past few days I had said goodbye to life. And had finally come. I was exhausted. By late afternoon, however, I began to feel better, which I recognized by the hunger growing inside me. Life was returning, and with it, its demands. I was still worried about home. I felt I needed to see him, but I simply couldn't bring myself to move. Finally, I got up and reluctantly left my quiet, safe dome. I stepped back into the world I was already so tired of. First and foremost, I looked for a place to relieve myself. Naturally, they couldn't dig a latrine in the rock, but it turned out they had repurposed one of a strange, empty pseudo-wells, like the one I had been imprisoned with. I felt a small sense of gratitude that my cell hadn't been used for such a purpose. The well was covered with a platform taken from a cart and shielded by a screen. They had even placed a bowl of water for cleaning oneself, and another one for washing hands. The latrine was empty at the moment. On the level where the dome I had been resting was located, there were few people around it. It seemed to be reserved for the leadership. The entire camp was situated below, on a terrace surrounding the strange flattened hill, reached by narrow steps carved in the rock. There were dozens of supply carts, peasant two-wheelers, and merchant platforms. Between them, makeshift tents had been set up, with their guy ropes tied to the carts and poles propped against the rock. Were military tents and structures made of whatever tarps they could find. People were everywhere, but no one paid attention to me. Children ran between the tents, women were doing laundry, some people were simply sleeping on carts or under them, lying on mats spread across the rock, or just sitting and staring into space, much like I had been doing earlier. Many were wounded, and they all looked exhausted and emaciated. Where the soldiers were stationed, there was some semblance of order, but the troops seemed like a ragtag group from various demons. Here was a mismatched assortment of uniforms from different units and civilian clothes. Some had full kits, others lacked weapons entirely, and I saw people armed with common farming tools. Cleavers for cutting dairy, flails and axes. I saw a makeshift blacksmith's workshop, with a fire burning, hammers clanking, and two men in leather aprons straightening and sharpening swords, reforging chipped blades and hammering out dented helmets. On one side was a pile of broken weapons, armor and helmets, while on the other side repaired items were neatly stacked on racks. Never in my life had I seen so many Kirenis gathered in one place. Everyone was carrying some kind of blade, though not necessarily the prized clan knives. Many wore Kirenis clothing, while others had sewn or even painted their clan symbols on the sleeves and backs of the military jackets or cased tunics. For the first time in my life, I truly felt like part of my nation. All these years, I had considered being Kirenis to be a kind of secret society. Something that existed mainly in the village of the clouds and among my father's courtiers, but now that was somehow private. Now I was pushing my way through a crowd of tall, slender people with golden skin like mine, hearing sounds of my own language mingling with everyday Amitraji speech. Ordinary people. Ordinary Kirenis. A man was sitting under a canvas canopy stretched between supply carts, playing a cithar. I watched his fingers, capped with metal picks, deftly move along the wide neck of the instrument. Singing a tale about the man from the first moon, and the children gathered around him stared at him as if they were watching the dawn while making arrows. He attached arrowheads, fletched them with feathers of all kinds, and secured them with strong thread. The finished arrows landed in baskets, sticking out like bundles of strange, colorful plants. I wandered aimlessly among the bustling people and couldn't understand why I felt so lonely. Everyone was here together for a purpose. Everyone had something to do. They all seemed to know one another. I had come from nowhere, and my only goal was to continue wandering into the unknown. Order of my father, which I did not understand. I stopped a passing girl and asked her where the hospital was. She looked at me with wide, violet eyes filled with surprise. As was customary for Kirenis woman during the war, she was dressed in men's clothing, her violet hair tied at the back, but the well-filled front of her tunic left no doubt as to who I was dealing with. "And who you might be?" she snapped, ostentatiously resting her hand on the hilt of her clan knife. "How can you not know where the hospital is? And what do you want from the Reverend Gloom? You think he has nothing better to do? Why don't you find something to do yourself?" "Stop scalding me," I growled. "It's none of your business who I am or what I am looking for. I politely ask you for directions. I'm Pilar, son of a spearmaker, Tohimon of a Crane clan. And who are you to bark at me right away like that?" "I'm Water, daughter of a weaver from the Fish clan, and I don't believe you're a Tohimon. You barely stand taller than the ground. You don't even have a knife. And why don't you have any hair?" "You're insolent, rude, and ill-mannered," I spat. "The worst kind of girl. You think you can insult anyone without consequences. This is war. My father is dead. I am a Tohimon, but maybe only I and one other man from my clan have survived. That man is now in the hospital. I want to see him and check if he needs anything. We've only arrived yesterday, so I don't know where the hospital is." "I'll take you," she said, biting her lip. "I'm not sure, but maybe there are still some people from the Crane clan here." "Where can I get something to eat?" I asked as we walked past the carts. "You don't even know that?" she asked viciously. "Where did you even come from?" "There's no point in you asking. Those who should know, know. Not son of a bird-catcher, Candlewick, son of a blacksmith, and Gloom. They know. That should be enough for you. Can't you even answer a simple question without asking another?" "I just don't understand why no one told you where to get food." "Someone was supposed to bring it to me," I replied. "That's what was decided." She bit her lip again. "So, it was you. I didn't have time. There are dozens of wounded in the hospital. I don't know why I should bring food to someone who can walk on their own." "Because you were told to," I said patiently. That's how the army works. This is why girls cause more chaos than help in war. And what should I do? I'm a Kiranese woman, so I fight. Many women have covered themselves in glory during war. Have you never heard of Breeze, daughter of a seer? I have, I said wearily. But this isn't an heroic epic. It's a real war. A nasty one. Don't expect glory here, only pain, stench, fear, and suffering. I've already killed one Amitraji, she exclaimed. And you? I've killed a few, including an assassin. But that didn't make me any better. Just a necessity. The true man of Kiranan is brave and honorable. He joyfully gives his life for his clan and nation and creator. He kills like a wolf and laughs in victory, not whining. The song of a breeze says it clearly. I waved my hand and fell silent. Walked a little further. Water felt slight and salt, but along the way she scolded several random people, lecturing them on how true Kiranese should behave. 4 infantry soldiers drinking palm wine from a single gourd and playing dice instead of finding something useful to do. A pretty woman sitting on a cart, combing her hair and dressing up as if she were going to a wedding while people were suffering and fighting. And finally, she paraded a long man sitting on a wagon shaft, silently crying with his eyes fixed in the distance. Almost a man, and should have shown the courage of a warrior. By then, I was thoroughly fed up with it. I crouched next to the boy and gently touched his shoulder. Can I see the flute that you've got tucked in your belt? Do you know how to play it? He shook his head. It's my sister's flute. She's all I've got left, and now she's lying sick in the hospital. She's got yellow fever. They say she might die. She's only 8 years old. But she hasn't died yet, I said. And they are trying to treat her in the hospital, so don't mourn her just yet. Maybe she'll recover soon, and your grief will turn out to be unnecessary. Give me the flute. I'm not going to take it from you. Took the flute, an ordinary sakukami, and gave it a test blow. It had a pleasant, simple tone, so I played a melody, then another and another. I was no flute master, but I could play simple folk tunes. I noticed more children gathering around us. They were grimy, wearing torn tunics, but with clan trimmings and small knives on their side. They sat on the ground around me, staring with wide, moist eyes, like frightened little animals. Eyes that had seen fire, blood, and misery. Water stood over us with an impatient expression, her arms crossed ostentatiously. I played for a while longer, feeling that the tight expressions on the children's faces were softening. They started to look like less terrified pups and more like normal kids. Kids who should be learning letters or tossing a ball to each other, not trudging through wastelands, pursued by all the regiments of the Empire. At some point, I didn't even know what I was playing anymore, until I realized that the melody flowing from my fingers was the same song of heroism that I had used to encourage my trained smartness. It was just an ordinary flute, and those were just regular children. I couldn't have had the strange power over them that my other instruments gave me over animals, but something in them had changed. They had stopped sniffling, began to straighten their backs, and a look of quiet determination appeared on their little faces. I stopped playing and handed the flute back to the boy. Before you say that the real Kiranese only uses the flute to bash Amitraji's girls, show me this hospital. Headed to the hospital, and a few of the kids tagged along. Whose children are these? Don't they have parents or other relatives? Who's taking care of them? They are war orphans, she replied, still sulking. They joined us, and we all take care of them, but I don't even know if they are all Kiranis." "They'll become Kiranis in time," I said. "If we survive, that is." The hospital was surrounded by makeshift screens, but it mostly consisted of mats spread under canvas shelters. People lay there, surrounded by swarms of flies that buzzed around everywhere. Despite the incense smoke, and the stench was overwhelming. But I didn't see Hone anywhere. I asked about him in different ways, describing him as a Kiranese and an Amitraji, but no one could help me. There were only 5 medics. 2 were asleep, while the other 3 bustled up between the screens, carrying bloodied bandages, medicines in small teapots, and basins of water. My hands were shaking, and I felt a sudden fear inside me, like a giant snake was swallowing my insides. Then I saw Vocabulary. He was eerily tall and slender, with large, sugar-white teeth, a gleaming shaved head, and a copper-brown skin covered in tattoos. He was crouching under a closed military tent, dressed only in a loincloth and strange sandals, playing a 2-sided drum. I had no idea if it was Nguemba, whom I had already met, or someone else, but I immediately headed in that direction. "Stop!" Water shouted, grabbing me roughly by the arm and reaching for her knife with the other hand. "You can't go in there! What are you thinking?" I reached for her clenched fist, which was gripping the fabric on my tunic, placed my hand over hers, turned that under her arm, and with one more movement, I slipped the knife from the Kiranese girl's fingers as she tumbled backward, landing on her back into a pile of empty wicker baskets. I reversed the knife in my hand so the blade was hidden behind my wrist, and lowered my arm by the side. "Where is Hone, son of a wormwoodder, whom you tortured this very morning?" I asked calmly, as if inquiring if I could borrow a pinch of salt. Inside, however, I was burning with fury. Ben from Kebir raised his dark face, but nothing indicated he understood me. The Southerners looked strange. They were beautiful, like figures from a painting, yet they seemed terribly wild. They resembled predatory animals walking on 2 legs like humans. 2-legged leopards with face of statues. Repeated my question. Kabiri carefully set the drum aside and looked at me with his eerie, yellow, cat-like eyes. He touched his fist to his forehead and lips, then extended an open hand toward me. He remained crouched, but his head nearly reached my chest. Thought that if anything happened, I couldn't let him stand. He was very thin but sinewy, and his long, narrow muscles looked as hard as iron. "A man does enter the tent not," he said in broken Kiranese. "Canvas closed. Great spirit in power. Sick. Ver healing." "Hone in the tent?" "Not allowed, Nana. Olimwenga Osuri." "I must see me immediately, Kabiri," I said slowly but firmly. Couldn't tear my eyes away from his incredibly yellow eyes. I stared and stared, feeling my cheeks go numb. I remembered that before a fight you were supposed to look at your opponent's entire figure, focus roughly on the throat and take in everything, rather than staring into their eyes. It was said that Kabiri could tame animals with their gaze alone. But I wasn't a desert jackal. I had to get through, and he was lulling me to sleep with his stare. My whole body felt heavy, and I suddenly had the impression that a second pair of eyes, smaller but just as piercing and predatory, was opening on his broad forehead, right above his eyebrows. I shook my head and managed to pull my gaze away from the man's face. Then I took a step to the side and reached for the tent flap. Billy started to rise smoothly in one fluid motion despite his crossed legs. I twisted my hips and spun, kicking him with the heel of my back leg. It felt like the force of my sudden kick should have knocked down an onlooker, but I hit nothing. You are only a step apart. You couldn't have missed. Yet somehow the Kabiri's head and torso bent backward, as if he had no spine at all. Once in the palace I had seen a Kabiri acrobat dance, tall, slender, and naked. Her body gleamed with oil. She danced with a jug balanced on her head, with a goblet placed inside. The jug sat as if glued in place until she suddenly flipped it with one jump and froze, leaning forward. Jug landed in her hands, with the goblet fell on her raised buttocks. The girl effortlessly bent her back, lifted the jug above her head, and a stream of wine flowed perfectly into her goblet. Then, without warning, she swept her long, straight leg over her head and flipped, landing with one hand on the ground. When she had knelt before my father's throne, she was already holding the goblet, not a single drop of wine spilled. I lost my balance for a moment and had to dance a few steps to regain a fighting stance. I adjusted my grip on the knife, hidden behind my forearm. The Kabiri stood calmly, as still a copper statue. It seemed that he hadn't noticed anything, like he was simply standing there. Tall and slender, he resembled a puppet more than a man. I sensed that if I had made a single move, he would explode into action like a cobra. Too bad. Ajan Wenzi, he said quietly. All the imperial languages, Kabiri was the one I knew the least. Nwenzu, a friend. Calm down, friend. I was not calm, and I was not his friend. Hazima Indo, Hazima Kana, Kunantu. I dredged up from the depths of my memory. Must incite, must see my men. Or something like that. His roughly hewn face split into a grin, revealing large, white, pearly teeth. Pointed to his eyes, of which there were two again, like anyone else's. No enter. Watch. Inside great healing. You cry, scream, your Nwenzu die. Atufu. Understand? Great healing. Great spirits. Matufu. Death. I'll kill you, you dog! Water screamed, rushing toward us with a broken handle of shovel in her hand. You filthy rat! The Kabiri swiftly extended his hand and showed her his open palm. Nothing more. Water stopped abruptly, as if she had run into a wall. The handle slipped from her grasp. A few strands of her hair had fallen loose from her bun, draping across her face. With her eyes shimmering with furious tears and her mouth slightly open, she looked actually pretty. Her voice stuck in her throat. Please, Kabiri said to me. You knife ground, I show tent. Only watch. I must, I repeated stubbornly. Knife ground. Enzangu tilaha nte. Put down your weapon, man. I was about to drop the knife when I saw Water's face. Her sacred clan knife. If I dropped it to the ground, she really would kill me. Was a true Kiranese. I nicked my forearm slightly, placed my hand beneath the blade, holding the knife in both hands, then laid it down to the ground slowly. The last time I had seen my own knife, it was resting on the stand in my chamber at the House of Steel. I had fled in disguise, and I hadn't even crossed my mind to protect it and take it with me. And now some conqueror from Stone Demon was probably peeling tubers with it and picking his nails. What kind of Kiranese was I? Remember, you quiet. He commanded firmly and lifted the tent flap. Lasted only in a brief moment, no longer than 3 claps. Owen was kneeling on a mat in the middle of a tent. With cursed Kabiri nipples sticking out of his skull, his eyes rolled back, showing flashes of white, and his head turning side to side in human motion, like a water-powered mechanism. Bloom stood behind him, holding his hands on either side of Holmes, monotonously chanting a litany. The words poured from his mouth one after the other, and sacrificial lamps and incense burned all around. Bloom's voice was hoarse, and it seemed like he had been reciting for hours. It was an exorcism. Bloom was trying to cast out a demon from home. The tent flap fell back down. I didn't have time to scream, to grab the knife from the ground, or to storm into the tent. I didn't even have time to take a breath. Kabiri's arm shot out toward me, and his open palm appeared before my face. In that palm, a yellow, tiger-like eye suddenly appeared. Darkness. I woke up in my dome. If it was still the same day, I hadn't been unconscious for long, because the sun was still only just beginning to set, far above the swampy plain. Nothing caught, I just lay on the mat as if the entire trip down to the lower level of the fortress had been a dream. I found a towel and wiped my head, but there were no traces of blood on the cloth. The wounds I had been given down had already closed, and there were no new ones. Past needles might have had healing powers, but I never wanted to deal with them again. I walked out of the dome to the edge of the terrace and sat there, legs dangling over the abyss, staring at the distant mountains. Somewhere out there lay Nahel Zin Desert, an impassable sea of sand and rocks. Only a few dared to venture, and even fewer returned. Waterless wastelands, charm spots, and sand limits. The ominous urge of the end of the world. Back in my grandfather's reign, several military expeditions had been sent into the Nahel Zin. Once, even a binlik of desert heavy infantry, with chariots, weapons, and supplies, led by the mad Basar Kitagay. They were never seen again. 1,000 battle-hardened soldiers, Bactrians, Ornithons, 20 chariots, all swallowed by the sand, which I now had to cross. Wonderful. I was the fate bearer. My father wanted me to go into the dunes of Nahel Zin and meet my destiny. Fine. In my opinion, that destiny meant becoming a dried-up corpse lying in the sand and rocks, left for the vultures and jackals. So be it, as long as my people would benefit from it. Behind me, the sky turned crimson and purple, while dusk began to rise above the distant mountains, deep blue like Ain. I sat there until a long shadow, perhaps the last to be seen this day, suddenly fell over me. She stood there with basket in her hand, silhouetted against the fiery sunset like a slender black figure, but I did recognize her. Really, they would have sent somewhere else, I muttered wearily. Did you come to kill me because I touched your clan knife? Set the basket on the ground, placed her hands on her thighs, bowed her head, and remained silent. My behavior was unforgivable, she said quickly and very indistinctly. He added something that might have sounded like Kodaimasa Tohimo, though I wasn't sure. I did not hear you, I said mercilessly. No one has ever scolded me like Reverend Gloom did. I was humiliated. I was ordered to bring you dinner and offer humble apologies. You spat in my face. You took my knife in front of everyone, and you were still alive. I shamed the entire fish clan. If only I had fulfilled my order and brought you that cast meal, you wouldn't have wandered through the camp, noble Dohimon, and risked the life of your companion in your glorious mission. So, I humbly apologize. My behavior was unforgivable. Kodaimasa Dohimon. Even your apologies are arrogant, I spat out.
I've been apologized to a few times in my life, even by Gloom. I know how to tell the difference between the remorse and insolence. When you make a mistake, admitting it isn't shameful and doesn't humiliate anyone. But I don't care. Let Gloom on someone else who, in the moment of madness, decides to live with you. Worry about that. I'll be leaving very soon, and I don't think I'll live long anyway. So drop the bowing, it's becoming ridiculous. He straightened up, then knelt on the ground and opened the basket sleeve. I'm not a mid-treasure. I'm a free person. I know how to follow orders, but I also know how to think. I thought Kiranese were allowed to think. Everyone has their own path uphill that they travel alone, don't they? Yes, but we are at war. In wartime, someone has to lead. Orders are given, and they have to be followed even if they seem foolish. A field commander can't explain to every spearman why they want the wedge formation now and Bal's horns later. He gives the order. I have to follow one myself, even though I don't understand why. That is what a guru is. I agreed to it because I'm free, but now, since I agreed, I obey. Put down the balls, you don't need to sit with me, I can eat by myself. I have to, she replied grimly. Tom didn't just order me to apologize to you. He has also ordered to serve you during the meal, like a servant would. Have mercy. I release you from this order. You can't. That is my Agiro. Only Gloom can release me. I sat on the smooth rock and watched her pull out a clean mat, a stack of tins, bowls, spoons, and tongs from the basket. There was stew, meat, vegetables, sometimes called hishmish. Aromatic but burned like fire. It was said to help avoid poisoning, even if the meat was spoiled. Military dishes. Stew, dura, some bread, long onions to prevent teeth rot. She took out a gourd and poured me some palm wine. Serve yourself as well. There's enough for two. I don't eat much right now. I was ordered to serve, not to keep you company, she responded stubbornly. I shrugged. There aren't enough dishes, she said after a while. There's an empty bowl from the porridge, I pointed out. And there's another spoon in the basket. We can share the wine from the same cup. What? That would be almost like a kiss. What do you think you're suggesting? I've already told you, there's war, and war has some sacrifices. It was getting dark. Down on the terrace below, small fires were lighting up one by one, flickering in the dusk like scattered rabbits. Mother sighed, rolled her eyes, but served herself some dura and stew in the second bowl. Sat in silence. What does it mean that you are bearer of fate? It means I have to go where I'm told, even though there's no obvious reason. Because the knowers believed that some good would come from it all for us. That's it. Don't ask me what that really means. To me it means nothing. Apparently, there are some lines of events that connect people, things, and places. That's just fate. Sure. Everyone has their fate, their own path up here. It all depends what you choose at any given moment. You can take many paths. Your fate will be different depending whether you try to kiss me now, jump off this cliff, pour the sauce on your head, or simply finish your dinner. There's not much more you can choose, because you won't drown there, nor will you fly away. So, everyone has many fates. The knowers must have seen a version of your fate that will affect us all at some point. Usually people can only have their own path up here, but maybe you are different. Apparently, you are carrying the life path of thousands of Kiranese on your shoulders, even though you don't realize it. That's why you are the fate bearer. Now I feel really relieved I mattered. Light the lamp, please. Drag a spark, and after a moment, the flickering flame painted her face in golden light. Large, almond-shaped eyes, a flat nose, and full, shapely lips, slightly too big for her delicate face. Her short, dark purple hair, tied in a small ponytail at the back, seemed to vanish into the night. It would be better if no one just told me what this is about. If I knew what to do, I would just do it. But instead they pointed me in vague direction. How am I supposed to know which choice is the right one? You yourself said everyone has many fates. So how do I follow the one that's best for all Kiranis? How do I recognize it? Knowing that the future of everyone depends on it doesn't help me at all. Should I just jump off this cliff or kiss you? That would be the same, she laughed. Better yet, put that hishmish on your head. What did you do before the coup? I was a courtier at the Imperial Palace, answered evasively. It was so long ago that it feels like years have passed. What about you? What did you do? We fell silent for a long. We had a beautiful clan manor among the rocks and lakes. Our family raised steeds. I played centaur in the evenings and spent my whole life in the stables. We lived as Kiranis should. We had furniture, paintings, old songs, and scrolls. Everyone practiced a sacred craft. My father, my mother, my brothers. My uncle was a blacksmith, my mother a weaver, my father a cooper, my brother was a fisherman. The other taught riding. In our style, not the Amitraji way. What was your craft? Wood carving, but I didn't get far with it. It was too much overwork at the palace. I know. The emperor was a traitor. He lived like an Amitraji. Clenched my jaw. I hadn't expected Water's word to sting so much. I pictured my father in his clan tunic, with a knife at his side, singing us stories in the most Kiranis setting possible, in his pavilion at the village of clouds. Father in his workshop, wearing a leather apron, crafting the finest, flawless javelins. I counted my breaths. I relaxed my muscles, but I was still trembling. I took a sip of wine. Emperor was not a traitor, said in a trembling voice, though slowly and calm. Weren't for his family, which you call treacherous, there wouldn't be a trace left of a Kiran. No one would even know the language. We would be nameless slaves from the lowest castes or fodder for the underground mafia. Stopped because I realized I was shouting. Don't say that again in my presence, or I will kill you. Again in a silent voice. Especially if you consider yourself a warrior who has accepted the war Agiru. Emperor ruled over the entire country, over all people of all empire, not just us. But when he left the palace, he wore the tunic and carried the knife at his side. He built a Kiranis manor in the great courtyard. That was his home too, with pavilions standing among the rocks and shrubs, open to the lake. Emperor was a Kiranis, and everything he did in accordance with the codes and customs, even in politics. Never knew a better man. Mosukando, I've said everything. I heard what you said, he replied angrily, and then there was silence. Fell quiet. So did I. I emptied the cup and stared into the flame of the lamp. I calmed down. My anger flared and burned out, like fire consuming a straw effigy. Felt only sorrow and the sense of injustice. Nuts of my anger still smoldered underneath. Suddenly, Water reached out and lightly touched my hand. I'm sorry, he whispered. It's easy to throw accusations when you don't know everything. That time has passed and everyone is dead. All that's left is ash and memory. There's no longer my palace or your home. She lowered her head. We'll build new homes. We'll find a place far from the Amitraji and their mad underground mother. A place we can all defend. And there we'll put up new houses, plant fields, and have. We'll call upon our Nadaku. You'll see. Kiranen will be reborn, truly. I probably won't see it myself. I'll follow my path into the unknown. I'm the Faith Bearer, remember? When do you have to leave? Soon. I have no idea when. As soon as my companion can continue. I reached for the jug, poured some wine, and handed her a cup. She took it hesitantly and turned it in her hands. I used to think that I'd do this on my wedding day. Palm wine from a single cup, 2 splinters from the same lamp, his knife in my sheath and mine in his. 2 hands tied with a sacred ribbon, with a prayer to the Creator, and then crossing the bridge to the Isle of Brides together, arm in arm with someone I wanted to walk with forever. Now everything has burned. The underground mother has returned. Everything is drenched in blood for her glory, and then become one. Kiranen will return, I whispered. You said it yourself. We have to believe in that, and if it happens, you'll find some land, preferably by the sea, where there are rocks and trees together, stronger than the storms, bending but not breaking. You'll build clan homes, settlements, and temples to the Creator there. You'll sing songs to Kamarasu, and on the first day of spring you'll fly kites. Then you'll find someone to cross the bridge with. And if that happens, think of me, because it might mean that I found the cursed lines of fate and did some good. I'd like to believe it will be so. Whatever happens to me, I'll think that it's happening so that you can tie your hands with someone using a sacred ribbon and exchange knives. It will make things easier for me. The fate of one saved person is a tangible goal, something I can at least imagine. You yourself claimed that only a madman would want to live with me, she replied, pulling her face back from the glow of a lamp and hiding in the shadows. War breeds madmen, I assured her. You'll find one, water, daughter of a weaver. Handed me the cup, drank, and it was really like a kiss. If that day ever comes, I'll think of you fine, she whispered. I poured more wine and gave her back the cup. It's so quiet here. It's as if there were no war. Far away. You can't hear the sound of flames, signal drums, the horns of the trackers, the cries, or the wailing of towers. Nothing, only birds and the wind. But soon we'll have to leave too, once the wounded are a little better. Then the march, skirmishes, and war will start again. They'll find us. They won't rest until they do. There's only now, I replied. What was is already gone. Only memory remains. Tomorrow hasn't come yet and is hidden. We have to live with what we have within our reach, so that we can remember each moment afterwards. We don't know how many we have. She took a sip, and when she handed me the cup, our hands met in the darkness. Yes, there is only now. And then, as I led her to the dome, I could feel her heart pounding through the thin fabric of her jacket. Was it mine heart? How could you do this to me? She whispered much later in the darkness. We're still tightly entwined, both drenched in sweat, even though the night was cool. I just wanted you to remember me. I would have remembered you anyway. One day you fought me and won. Then you made love to me and won again. But you should have been clumsy and shy. It should have been a sweet but insignificant memory. You had no right to make me feel this way. It's like playing the cinder, I said. You play on me and I play on you. His name was Hook, son of a cooper. I loved him because he was the first real Kiranese I ever met. And your family? Oh, stop it. I lied to you. My parents were traitors. My mother was a Kiranese, but she hated our people and customs. She served the underground for as long as I can remember. For a few years, I had to live with her in the woman's house near the Red Tower. My father was an imperial official and didn't even know his real name. He used only the Amitraji one. I found out who I really was when I was 10. By the time I was 14, there was no single day that I went by without me arguing with my mother. She wanted to make me a follower of the underground, and I wanted to be a Kiranese. Finally, at 16, I left to live with my uncle in the countryside. He actually was a honest Kiranese. He forged me a knife and taught me everything. My aunt taught me letters and woman's knowledge. It was my aunt who was the weaver, not my mother. That's where I met Hook. He lived nearby, was a hunter, and we met by chance one day under the blooming plum trees. I was sure we'd marry, even though he was almost 25. But when the underground mother returned, they attacked our homes, peasants from a nearby village. I was pregnant at the time, but then I miscarried. And they took Hook to the tower, just like they did with my uncle and aunt. Only I was taken to the woman's house. That's how I know it all happened because of my own mother. Silence fell. Silence and what? Salty darkness. It's gone, I whispered. There's only now, remember? Stolen time when there is no war, just you and me. A small moment that belongs neither to war nor the underground mother. Yes, she replied. There is only now. And there was only now for a long time. A nightmare like that I had only once in my life. On the night during the draft when the assassin came to my chamber. The night Irisa died. Back then, I saw the prophetess approaching, hidden in a cloak woven from the flames. This time, I saw the surroundings of a camp, as if I were a jackal running across the muddy plain, filled with twisted black branches draped with seaweed, amidst the stench of dried mud and carrion. Instead of a deep blue-black of the night, there was a ruddy twilight, as though an entire village had burned in the distance, or as if there were 10 moons, not 2, and they were all bleeding. I floated above the cracked mud, gliding over it in zigzags like a night bird, seeing a trail glowing faintly like scattered phosphor powder in the killer's chamber. A faint glow filling 2 tracks where carved with swans rolled, setting on dead branches and hovering in the air. A glowing path leading in winding curves towards a strange, smooth mountain, 2 truncated cones, one atop the other, covered in wild, spherical buildings, like a colony of meadow mushrooms. Everything was bathed in a dim, steady light under blood-red sky. And I saw who I had just been. At first, I was the white figure darting off swiftly as if hunting leopard, but running on 2 legs, hunched close to the ground, arms bent. I managed to focus on it. I saw slim legs, a lithe body with round hips, and breasts bouncing with each step. I saw a woman running, but moving so fast and smoothly as no human ever could. It was hard to keep up with her. I didn't know why the sight of her filled me with terror. It was as though I was looking at some monstrous demon. A woman, matted hair and skin as pale as the belly of a loach, sped forward while I floated far above her like a spear. She leapt over a fallen tree in one bound and pressed herself to the ground for a moment, sniffing like a dog, and lifted her head and let out a terrifying scream. It sounded like a roar of a buffalo, the howl of a rock wolf, and the eerie wail of a sea creature all at once. I saw her arched back suddenly erupt with rows of spines like arrows sprouting from each vertebrae, her fingers elongating into hooked claws, her hair resembling porcupine quills. She howled again, raising her pale, bluish, corpse-like face with dreadful, gleaming eyes sunken in dark eye sockets. From her impossibly stretched lips, 2 rows of crooked, powerful teeth shot out. Then she took off running again, following the faintly glowing trail with certainty. Saw her vanish into the thick, low bushes at the foot of the mountain. The sentry stood by the stairs leading to the first terrace, in half armor and helmets, with painted clan battle sign, between them a fire burned in an iron basket. I wanted to shout to warn them, but I couldn't. I was just a gaze hovering like a bird over the dry sea of mud. Sentries must have heard something, because one of them grabbed a torch and lit it in the fire basket, while the other set down his spear and picked a bow. They didn't say a word, communicating only with their eyes. The string creaked, then silence fell, undisturbed by the faintest rustle. The sentry raised the crackling torch. Ben moved it forward, gripping the handle with his other hand. Carefully, he stepped into the bushes, moving his arm with the burning torch aside. The second sentry aimed his arrow where the light fell. Both moved cautiously and silently, not getting in each other's way and watching each other's backs. I screamed in the dream, but it was a silent scream. Scream of a stone. No one heard me. Ghastly woman sprang from the bushes like a tiger, right into their faces, the sharp, angry buzz of an arrow, the crash of a torch soaring through the air, and the scrape of a sword being drawn blended into one sound. Then came the muffled scream and the crunch of bones. Blood sprayed onto the white, smooth slope of the hill before the torch fell to the ground. The demon woman, with bared, sharp-like teeth and hair like porcupine quills, turned her half-dead face directly at me, a pale face with spark in her eyes and sunken cheeks. Face I knew well. Face of dead Mira. I woke up suddenly, choking on a scream that rattled in my throat like a trapped bird. Dawn was approaching. The sky was grey. I could see through the strange glowing walls of a dome. Water was kneeling in the entrance, showing me her crow's feet, round buttocks, and the curve of her waist, then the almost triangular line at her back. "Did you have a nightmare?" she asked. "I think so," I replied, trying to shake off the fog of sleep. "Something seems to have happened below," she whispered. "I was woken up by some screams." As I hastily threw my clothes and fumbled with the ties of my boots, my throat felt like it was turning to stone. A tight circle of people surrounded the laser. They were silent, except for occasional muffled sobs from the crowd. It sounded far worse than a choral line. There were a palpable sense of dread in the air, and I felt myself turning to stone as I pushed through the crowd. They lay in the row in front of the laser, covered with clothes that were slowly soaking in blood, like bloody bundles prepared for a long journey. 6 bundles. "There's nothing more we can do," said Gloom, standing over them in his full-body chainmail, leaning on his glaive. "We cannot help them, and the killer has escaped. Our brothers have already walked the path up the mountain. meet the Creator. We've set extra guards, though he won't return during the day. Now leave, we will bury them at sunset, in silence. Then he turned his veil of linked rings toward me, and lifted the flap of the tent slightly. Come inside, son of a spearmaker. I had no choice but to follow him. The bundles lay in terrible stillness, flies crawling over them, and from the one of the bundles a hand protruded. And missing 3 fingers. Holmes was no longer sitting in the middle of the tent, but on the mat on the ground, looking at me with completely clear eyes. I'm as hungry as a leopard, Arjuk. Did I sleep long? Where are we? What's a watcher of a creator monk doing here? Am I really seeing a wandering monk warrior, or am I still dreaming? Couldn't speak. The words stuck in my throat. He's healthy, said Gloom. As much as I was able to help him. The illness of the mind may return. He was already sick when the needles were driven into him. By the way, Nguemba Asani is dead. What do you mean? Nguemba Asani, not son of a beard catcher, son of a potter, the trackers who captured you. The 2 soldiers who escorted you to the dome at the top were at the guard duty today, and the boy, the orphan named Hammer, son of a hunter. I was treating his sister for yellow fever. I opened my mouth and stayed just like that. No breath, no words, only a rasping sound. It was a demon. Doom continued from his chainmail veil. A powerful demon of a charm spot. One we call Royho, and the Amitraji call Upirmas. This is what I saw in the water and the shapes of smoke, but I only understand it now. It is following your trail, killing anyone who has anything to do with you. Everyone. That's why you must leave immediately. We'll give you a few men, supplies, even mounts. You must reach where your fate leads you, son of a spearmaker. Yours and ours. You may succeed. I will pray for you, Pillar. How does he? Home began in amazement, but we didn't pay attention to him. He noticed that and fell silent. What do you mean, everyone? You, Tohimon Candlewick, Home, not to mention... I've been performing exorcism over your companion all night. The monster circled the tent. I could feel it, hear it, but he couldn't break through the song. Nguemba went out to drive it away and was killed. I only managed to fend it off. It left, but will return. You said it's following my trail. In that case, we must leave immediately. Maybe it will follow us and it will leave you in peace, if it attacks those I meet. That's exactly what I'm hoping for. The monk interrupted me. Not attacking your pursuers. It's attacking because it senses you. Your trail. It's you the Royho wants. If you stay, Home, son of the Wormwooder, Candlewick, son of a blacksmith, Water, daughter of a weaver, and I will all die, and anyone so much you rush against. Go gather your things, son of a spearmaker. There's no time to waste. Agirukano! I barked, my voice as hard as stone, and turned to leave. Pillar! Doom called after me. I turned. You'll have time to say goodbye. Water, when you continue on your journey... I know, son of a spearmaker. Stepped out of the tent.